Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Sun City in Arizona. Hope you've all had a super fantastic, sparkling Serenity Sunday. It has been an awesome day here, hot. It is, what is it, 8:20, and it is 109 degrees outside. For my Kiwi people, that's in the 40s, low 40s, low 40s. I just took my hair out. We just got back from a walk, so hair's all over the place right now. But it's been a great day. This morning we talked about our drive that we had taken when we got back, because we did our Facebook Live when we got back from our drive. It was, almost 3 hours we were gone, and it was awesome. Ended up on somewhere called Happy Valley, and I was talking with one of the campers tonight, and he believes it was named by a vet for some place in Nam called Happy Valley that wasn't exactly happy. And I was like, well, that's an interesting story, and it's one I've got a note of to go back and research it a little more and see the story behind it. But it was a great drive, and he gave us suggestions for some other ones to go on as well. So got those written down too. We came in and we watched this afternoon we watched the rest of the Return of the King. So my Lord of the Rings trilogy is now done, complete. Sat and did some reading as well, and did some more of my genealogy course, where I'm up to doing the assessment for the first module. So I've done the 2 sections on the first module. Now I have to do the module testing. The module testing is mainly written answers. I haven't done those since I was in high school. I found here in the States, just about every test, in fact, with the exception of the math class and the English class, all the other classes were all multiple choice for the final exams and stuff. With English one we had to write a piece, and for math, of course, we had to solve the problems and things. But for the most part, everything I've done here in the States is basically multiple choice. But this is a course that's done out of a school in the UK, so very much written answers. And I was like, yes, I love doing written answers, because then I get to explain myself. Because if I'm caught up between 2 answers on a multiple choice, I'm like justifying in my head which one I'm going to select. But with the written answers, I can actually just say what I want to say, and they can figure out if I understand the question, if I understand the material, and each question's got a mark against it. So how many marks each question is worth. So we shall see. Haven't submitted the final thing yet, but been doing the course. Been through some of the questions to have a look to see what they were. Some of them I've been able. And when I was a kid, I used to suffer from test anxiety. And so in high school, the teachers knew I knew the material. They knew I knew it inside out and back to front. It's just when it came to testing, I couldn't recall it. And so the guidance counselor at the school gave me a really cool way of doing that. And that was, he said, don't even pick up the pencil. He said, when you sit down and do the exam, he says, take a deep breath. He says, then turn the paper over when instructed and sit there and read. Just read through every question. Don't even answer them. Don't even attempt to answer them. Just read every question. Then go back to the beginning. On the second time through, start answering them in your head. What if you could put an answer down right now, what would you put? Then on the third time through, then pick up the pencil and start filling in your answers. And so I started employing that technique, and all of a sudden my exam marks skyrocketed. So the teachers knew I knew the information, and I just locked up when I went into an exam room. So I went into the assessment today to have a look at it. Is it one that I can sit there? And I employed this through when I went back to school as well, here in the States, employed that same principle, and ended up getting A's through all my classes. So that was pretty cool. Accounting was the other one I had to do written answers for, because we had to fill in debits and credits and balance sheets and profit and losses and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so I went in, had a look at all the questions, wrote all the questions out. A couple of them I was like, oh, yep. And then I just went in and typed the answer in there. But, of course, I haven't submitted the final thing yet, because I need to go back and, because there's some questions in there I was like, okay, that question sounds very familiar to the next question. There was 2 questions that were very, very similar. So I want to take time to read the questions and figure them out before I go and submit answers to them, because they're so similar. And I'm almost like, are they actually asking the same question but just a different way? So do I give the same answers? And, there's slightly different answers I can give for the slightly different questions. So I'm going to be doing that. But today we learned all about one name studies. And one name studies is when one person where somebody will take a last name. It could be a common last name, and they do a one name study just on that last name in that particular region during a particular time period, and see if there's any connections in there. For me, I'm not doing an official one name study, but every time I come across one of the surnames, I have a whole swag of them off in their own separate and micro trees within my own tree. And I just follow them through every now and again. And then I've met a guy who's doing a one name study on my second great grandmother. Yeah, because she got married and was no longer a Scantlebury. And he's doing a one name study on that and has been spending years doing it. And you can go to his website and you can look up the names and everything else. And I was able to help him with the Scantleburys on the New Zealand side for my for my part of the family. And that's how I met up with, and then through the DNA matchups on Ancestry, this guy contacted me from Canada, and we went in and had a look, and he was with the Scantleburys, and his line came down so far. He kept mentioning grandmothers until I found one in my tree, and I thought, let me go and check Richard's site. So I went and checked Richard's sites, and there was the rest of it there, and I was like, yay! And it turned out we were seventh cousins. So one name studies can be kind of fun because you're only looking for that one name, and then figuring out where in the tree it fits, and just pulling all that information together. So I like it because, if you've got an unusual last name, finding out if everybody's connected, and if they're not connected, wow, that's a little different. So yes, there's one name studies, learning about the history behind surnames. Like the Romans, they started around 7th century BC with first names and family names, and then continued until the end of the 7th century AD when the Roman Empire was declining. The Chinese, before the 5th century BC, some Chinese ruling families, so those in power, they had first names and last names. And it was after this period that surnames were allowed to be used by commoners. And by the 3rd century BC, so this is 200 years later, surnames were used by most Chinese people. And we talk about the medieval Europe, and surnames were descriptive. So the descriptive ones being, is it based on the occupation your father has? Is it based on the place where you live? Is it based on a physical characteristic that you have, which could be something that you're wearing? It could be, a beard that you have, like black beard, things like that. And around 1200, some ruling families, surnames became hereditary, so they were passed down through the thing. And then it wasn't until by the 1400s, some common people were using surnames at that point as well. But it wasn't until effective record keeping came about in the 1600s, and actually turned out to be taxes, that most people were starting to use a surname because they needed to keep a better record of who paid taxes and who hadn't. So people started using surnames at that point as well. And then we're looking, and one of the other things we learned about was the different variations of spelling of last names. And like my maiden name, Eakins, there's a lot of variations for that. My mother-in-law, there's a lot of variations on her name. And it's sort of like, why are there so many different variations? And I even have a second great grandfather who had a name that could be spelled with either an S or a Z, an I or a Y. And then depending on who was writing it, whether the Z and the S came before the I and the Y or after the I and the Y. So it was brazier, and it just depended on who was spelling it, whether they spelled it Brazyer or Brasyer or Brazyer. No, Izer, Braiser, Bray. There's just all these different variations. And what it comes down to is the reason there's so many variations is the person who has that last name could be illiterate, so can't spell it. So it's up to the person who is hearing that name, what do they hear and what do they write down? So when you're looking at census reports, they are all handwritten. If you look at this, go and look at the census reports, they are all handwritten. So whoever the census recorder was at the time, whatever they heard for the name, that's what they wrote. So that's why it can be difficult at times finding people on a census report, because it could be a variation of the spelling because of what the record taker heard at the time and how they wrote it down. And the same was true with the church scribes that did the parish records for the births, deaths, and marriages within the parish. And when people were coming into the countries, they always say, at Ellis Island, the names got changed. No, the officials at Ellis Island didn't change the names. It was based on what they heard or what was said, or it could even be something as simple as the person coming into the country wanted an American-sounding name rather than the name they had left their country with, because they wanted to fit in. They didn't want to be known as German or Lithuanian or Russian or anything like that. They wanted an American-sounding name, so they changed their own name. My husband's family came in as a Brahmsovich, and it got shortened over time in the early 1900s. And then when my father-in-law was 5, that's when it got changed to Brahms. So because he decided he didn't want Abrams anymore, so he changed it to Brahms. So it's within a family as well, changing it so it fits the place that you live in. And then there were things like, people would change their middle name based on where they were living. So I was like, what? And there were descriptive names in there like hills and woods and stuff like that would become middle names because, we no longer live by the Red Gate, we live by the Blue Gates, and the middle name became Blue Gate. But the last name could still be Smith because they're still blacksmiths. So that was kind of interesting to read about how middle names got changed as well. But it's very interesting learning names, and they also give us different resources and stuff where you can actually go on the internet and you can look up the history behind last names. Where did they originate from? Where did they come from? What was interesting is I went through my 4 grandparents for their names. So my grandfather's name, my grandmother's maiden name, my papa's name, and my nana's maiden name, and went through those. And only 1 out of the 4 didn't have an origin story in there. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So my maternal grandmother, her maiden name, I can't find a history on it. Well, I couldn't find history on one side. I did find history on another side. So I thought that was kind of interesting that these websites that tout that they have the last names on there, and you go in and you type the last name, they go, we have no record of that. I was like, well, that is not interesting. But I did find one name searches on one of my, in fact, the surname I couldn't find, there's actually a one name search on that one. So I'm sort of like, oh, that would be interesting to go and have a look, contact that person and go, hey, my grandmother, that was her maiden name, and I'm interested to find out what you have in her tree. And then there was a couple of other of my great-grandparents whose names were being one name searched as well. And I know there's a second great-grandmother because that one I've known about for years. So it's kind of interesting when they give you these resources and you go and you play in them, and then you get into the test area and they're sort of like, and one of the questions was, hang on, I wrote it down. Oh yeah, name and explain the origins of the surname that you researched in the learning activity surnames on the internet. And I'm like looking at these things going, okay, first of all, for my maiden name Eakins, it goes through like about 10 different variants of the name, along with all the history that goes behind the different variations of the name. And the paragraph is like about this long. And I thought, and I've got to sum that up into the origins. I'm like, help. So it's quite interesting. So I'm now looking at the other family names to see which ones of those I could go and maybe I'll just pick one out at random or something like that. But it's all fun. It's all good. And it's interesting learning the origins of names, where they came from, how they came into existence and how they were used, and how it was the ruling families that started off with the surnames, and then later on it filtered down to the commoners being allowed to have surnames. So that was kind of interesting, just watching the history and how long it's been around as well. I mean, you're talking, was it 7 BC and 5 BC with the Chinese and the Romans, with their beginnings of their surnames and things like that. So they've been around for a very long time. And it took a while for the Europeans in the UK to catch up on those, because they went till around the 1200s, and that was only ruling families. So it's kind of interesting following the history through time and seeing all of these. But anyway, tell us, what did you get up to today to relax? So we've had a great relaxing day. We went out for a very late walk. And Zeffy got to play with Chloe a little bit. Chloe's one of the puppies that we meet along the way that's around the same age as her, around the same size, and got this cute little face, very expressive face. And her and Zeffy, always when they meet, they do the kangaroo, we call it the kangaroo dog hug, where they're both up on their back legs and fighting with their front paws and kind of embracing at the same time. So they do like a kangaroo hug. What did he call it tonight? Oh, the dog hug, I think it was. Yeah, so they were both up on their hind legs and hugging each other with their front paws. It was really cute, and they always greet each other that way when they get within distance of being able to touch. So what did you get up to today to relax? Have you got your week planning done? My week planning was already done before today started, so that was good. I got that done. I think I actually did that yesterday. Did I do that yesterday or Friday? I think I did it yesterday. And I have a ton of emails to go through, and I'm like, yeah, not doing any of that today. But let us know what you got to do today to relax. If you're watching us on YouTube, please give us the thumbs up, subscribe, and ring the little bell for notifications. And have a super fantastic, sparkling rest of your Serenity Sunday. We will catch you back here early tomorrow morning for Magic Monday.